Chirohustle. Sit back and learn from the greatest influencers in the profession on the world's #1 chiropractic podcast. Before we dive into this powerful episode, please remember to subscribe to our channels and to give us a 5-star rating on iTunes to continue hustling. This episode is sponsored by Imaging Services, Chiro Health USA, Chiro Moguls, Pure Chiro Notes, Titronics, Sherman College of Chiropractic, New Patients in a Box, the Influencer Authority Podcast Training, Mango Voice, Community Healthcare Resources, Life Chiropractic College West, and M-Sculpt. Let's hustle.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 464 of the Chiro Hustle podcast. I am your producer, Luke Millette, and here's your host, James Chester.
So today we have the opportunity of interviewing Dr. Ryan Dopps. In this episode, we discuss how natural is normal. Stay tuned. Welcome back. This is another episode of, you guessed it, the Chiro Hustle podcast. Episode 464. I have Ryan Dopps coming in from Wichita, Kansas. And I'm out in beautiful Grand Junction, Colorado. And it's going to be a dynamic, essential interview tonight. And this guy's second generation chiropractor. I believe there's 16, possibly 17 chiropractors in this guy's family. It's a robust movement. He practices with his wife. She's also a chiropractor. And I think that meeting you was a divine meeting down in Atlanta at the Dynamic Essentials Gathering. But before we get into Dr. Ryan Dopps and his world and get to know him again, I'm just going to let everybody know the big why behind our show. And we exist for very specific reasons. We protect freedom of speech, medical freedom, family freedom. I know that's a big mouthful there, but those things are under fire, and it's essential that we have practitioners that speak the truth and that are willing to share why chiropractic is so powerful and can change the world. Secondly, we protect BJ Palmer's Sacred Trust. I think that that's something that is a standalone mention. And if you guys don't know what that means, go and search on your favorite search engine and find out what BJ Palmer's last words were. And if you do that, you'll know that we're supposed to guard it well. And then we support subluxation-based chiropractic. Once again, it's a big thing. If you guys don't understand chiropractic, or if you're new to chiropractic, or maybe you're a chiropractor and you need a renewal on the topic as well. And then lastly, we do believe that when man or woman get adjusted, it connects the physical to the spiritual, which is innate intelligence and universal intelligence. And with that said, Dr. Ryan Dopps, welcome to the show.
Yeah, man, that's a great intro. Thanks for having me. It's a big honor. I love what you do. The screen back here behind me, we've played the chiropractic documentary for years back there, and it's fantastic. So I appreciate all the work that you've done just in the profession and just with the promotion of chiropractic. It's fantastic. I appreciate you, man.
Yeah, I can't say enough about having a chiropractic family. And I honestly think that I've created the best friends in the world that you could ever imagine by doing something that supports other people.
Yeah.
My sister called me today, and she said, I'm kind of envy of what you've been able to accomplish, because she's like, at public speaking, I would never want to do that. Doing anything where you're speaking in front of cameras, I would never want to do that. But she's like, I've literally watched your show and watched your comments and watched the things that people said. And she goes, you have so many people from all around the world that really love you.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Well, I think that the chiropractic family is, it's an innately driven family. And, we spoke a little bit about this before, but it's like, when we get out of that lack mentality of, there's not enough people to go around, and it's an abundance mentality. That's where we all thrive, right? That's where we all thrive. And I think when you get into a loving group of chiropractors, like I found at the Dynamic Essential, it's everybody's there for you, to support you to become the best chiropractor you can be, because that's just going to move the needle more, and it's going to allow more people to get seen through chiropractic at a high quality of chiropractic as well.
I think that checking, detecting, and correcting vertebral subluxation is something that people should be really excited about.
Yeah.
People should have that on their mirror. Every chiropractor, you guys should write that out on your mirror.
Yeah.
Put it on a Post-it note, put it on something, put it in lipstick, write on permanent marker. I check, detect, and correct vertebral subluxations. I adjust.
Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah. Totally agree. ADIO, man.
Yes, and that's just it. It's a beautiful profession. I tell people this all the time, and they're so confused as what chiropractic really is.
Mm-hmm.
They think it's to get them out of a mess that they've been in. Yeah, it can help with that, but it can also help with neurological development.
Right.
And that's the baseline of what makes this profession so powerful.
Totally right.
So based on you, the practitioner, you're going to get a chance to reintroduce yourself to friends, family, colleagues, patients, your community. Again, people are going to watch this, and I'm really proud of to feature you. But let's tell people how you got into the profession and a little bit about your story.
Yeah, cool, man. Well, as you mentioned, I'm one of 16. So my dad and his 5 brothers started about 45 years ago.
Wow.
So raised in chiropractic, raised with chiropractic philosophy. Half of them went to Palmer in Iowa, and then the other half went to Cleveland in Kansas City. So I was raised with the chiropractic philosophy, and not to discredit any of them, but it was no drugs, no vaccines, no anything growing up, right? It's you get adjusted, and that's what it is. But the practice style itself was a little bit of a mixed practice, right? It was a pain-based practice because it was the 80s and 90s and insurance was doing its thing, So, in the office, it was definitely wellness that my dad taught, but it was also very therapeutic and pain-based. So like you said, it can help with that, but there's other things that it gets to do. So I was raised with the philosophy, Chiro kid, that's what it was. I played on a traveling ice hockey team when I was in my mid-teens. And I was 16. I was in St. Joe, Missouri at a tournament. And, I think the story sounds real grandiose when I tell it. I'm sure it wasn't this flashy, but, I check the puck away from this kid. I'm on a one-on-one breakout with the goalie, and defender comes through, cross-checks me in my low back, and breaks my L5. Drops me to the ice, gives me a spondylolisthesis, can't get off the ice. My coach happens to be a chiropractor as well. So he comes sliding over and he gets down. He's like, "You're okay." And I'm balling, right? I just had my back broke. And he's like, "Good job, Ryan." He goes, "You keep milking it. We're going to get a good penalty shot." Well, I never got to take that shot. They had to take me off the ice. My dad's in the stands, right? So we get off the ice, we load up, we drive home, we go straight to his office, we take x-rays, and we find out that L5 got broken. And, when your dad's a chiropractor, there's only one option of how you're going to fix anything, right? And so there was no surgical, there's no medical consult, it was just, we're handling this through chiropractic. And so it took me about 6 months to get really back in the skates and, what I would say, get my game back, And at that moment, I realized the therapeutic value of chiropractic, right? It's like, man, this allows people to get back to their thing, whatever it is, right? And I worked in his office a little bit here or there. And, I realized that some people's game wasn't necessarily hockey. Sometimes it's gardening. Sometimes it's just playing with their kids, But what I realized was that chiropractic allowed me to do what I loved. And that was kind of the catalyst moment where I was like, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. So went to University of Kansas, did my undergrad there, moved down to Dallas, went to Parker, met my wife in school. She was a year behind me in school. And so I finished up, ran a PI practice in Dallas while she was finishing up with school. And then we moved back to Wichita together, and we've been in practice now 16 years. And it's been, I was just doing a re-exam on a lady today who had a spondylolisthesis. So we closed it, about 50% within 4 weeks. And dude, I got fired up, high-fived her. I mean, it was just, the passion is still there. It's stronger than ever because what we do is we change lives. We allow facilitation of that life-changing moment through the above down, inside out philosophy. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I think that's the greatest thing too, is like having like your own miracle story and how you got into chiropractic. I think is and now you're able to help people with similar condition.
Yeah.
And and not only that, but practicing with your wife and having a chiropractic lifestyle in your family.
Yeah.
I think those are things that you can't put a dollar amount on, having like a quality of life that you get to live like that. Like,
right.
There's just an abundance in the opportunity to do things that are in alignment with your life, and having a good partner and a good mission to go serve every day. I think there's something really special about that.
We've made a lot of connections with midwives and different people in the community, and I couldn't tell you the number of times that we've had somebody text us in the middle of the night or at midnight to go adjust a woman in labor or go check a newborn. And sometimes it's a toss up between who gets to go, because we're both so passionate about it. But ultimately, there's no question of if we get to go. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think that's great. I want to go back to something you said earlier about the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
From my recollection, I've talked to a lot of people in chiropractic, and they call it the Mercedes 80s.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Have you ever heard somebody call it the Nissan 90s?
No, I haven't. I've heard the golden 90s, but I've never heard the Nissan 90s. That's pretty
there you
good.
Go. Yeah. There's a chiropractic joke for you.
Yeah. No, I mean, the whole history of insurance is a whole nother conversation that we can have, but their ability to become the best provider for their participants and their plans was really neat. I think, unfortunately, I wasn't part of it. I graduated in 2006, and then President Obama kind of shook things up in 2008. And so, I remember in 2008, I took over for the district for the Kansas Chiropractic Association as the district president. And I remember meeting an old timer here at one of my first meetings, and he came up, shook my hand, told me, how my family's influenced him in becoming a chiropractor. And he just looked at me. He goes, man, he goes, I'm glad I'm getting out of this. It's the worst time to be a chiropractor, And I just looked at him. I was like, well, I'm just starting my career. So I feel like it's the best time because this is the only time I get. And so, the whole thing of like, for every, trial, there's an opportunity as well. I think that's kind of where, I think that's where a positive mindset comes in, is that there's always opportunity. Unfortunately, we can go through junk like we've gone through in the last couple of years, but there's always an opportunity to serve more and to find find a new place with where you're called.
Yeah, I think that's just it too. Is being prepared for opportunity.
Yeah.
There's nothing worse than like somebody says, "Hey, man, you should go invest in gold," and you don't have any money to invest in gold.
Yeah.
Or like, "Hey, man, go buy Bitcoin," and you're like, "You don't have any money for Bitcoin." Like, also, it has to do about opportunity for like career. It has to do about opportunity for like the season of life. And I do think, that we have not seen the golden age of chiropractic yet.
Totally agree.
I don't think that we've seen like the dividends being paid for the chiropractic profession that chiropractors have been like building interest in for 127 years. I don't think the chiropractic profession has seen its best day. Yeah,
I totally agree. And I think that there's a growing awareness, especially because of the last couple of years and what we've gone through globally, that maybe there's a different opinion we should listen to out there, and one that empowers individuals to know that there's a power within their body that heals, and that we don't need to turn to big corporations and politicians for that matter.
So I guess this is a really good follow-up to question one. Is like, it's following a great lead for me. Marketing. How do we get that message out to more people? That's like part A. Part two is, how do you communicate to your local market? So you're talking about a big initiative.
Yeah.
How do we get that out if we're now being called?
Yeah.
And it's a calling for chiropractic. How do we get that message out to more people to where it's not just the echo chambers or the stages of the seminars we go to and the podcasts that we listen to as a special interest? Like, how does that get out there?
Yeah. Well, I think cultural authority is definitely the way we do it. And you have to do it through, there's a lot of different ways you can do it. I think number one, I think what you're doing here is phenomenal, right? Because this allows people to stumble upon things, Also, you mentioned echo chamber, and I don't know that I'd really put your podcast in the category of echo chamber because it's not specifically upper cervical chiropractic. It's not specifically CBP. You interview everybody from every walk. And I love that you start with guarding the sacred trust, because that's definitely what we're called to as chiropractors, but it's not necessarily an echo chamber in my opinion, because you can draw interest from other people. There's a lot of chiropractors out there that do a lot of things that don't adjust. And while that may not be what I do in my practice, I still find value in it because, here in town, we've got a guy that I graduated with from Parker, less than a mile away from me, who does more PT based modalities and he doesn't adjust anything. So we find a great relationship that we can refer back and forth to each other. And I think that, ultimately we need to move the bone, right? And get the interference clear. We have to be able to distinguish our philosophy from the medical philosophy. So
Amen.
Any new patient that comes in here, I always tell them that we do things differently. I explain, the mechanistic approach and the vitalistic approach, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that the education is the key really on how you get it out there. I think big picture things, podcasts, movies, TV shows, that kind of thing would be the big cultural authority shift. But that takes a lot of money to invest in that stuff, But I think the way I do it in my practice is grassroots, man. It's live by example, right? And we teach people to take care of their bodies. There's this fun cycle that I've kind of discovered in my practice that when I'm fired up and connected, right, patients understand the value and the principle of chiropractic better because they understand the principle and value of chiropractic. They follow through with their care plan. That following through gets them better results. That fires me up. And it's this cycle, right, that a new practice member can drop into that cycle and they feel that energy and that connection. And you know what? It makes them follow through better and it gives them better results. And then they're referring more and you just grow it like that. And I think that the grassroots method is really how you have to do it.
Well, what I'm hearing is we need just better leaders in healthcare.
I think that's probably right.
And we need people that are accountable.
Yeah.
And people that will say what they will do and do it.
Yeah, totally right.
That's totally really right. What we need is we need integrity back on the front lines of who shares the message and who is the messenger.
Yeah. Some ADIO politicians, maybe.
Well, I was just going to go back to it. Down at Dynamic Essentials, I've been to this many chiropractic seminars. And I've never heard people just talking about, just go adjust the atlas.
Yeah.
See what happens.
Yeah. It's the key.
Like, I can't tell you, I heard just go adjust the atlas 100 times that weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And every person on that stage, just go adjust the atlas.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's what that's, BJ's quote that, the basic fundamental subluxation exists between C1 and C2, and that's what he said. That's what Dr. Sid said when he dropped the keys. That was the thing, is he saw the little gingerbread man and the lightning bolt wasn't going past the atlas. And once he removed the interference, the lightning bolt expressed, it was a visualization that he was having, and it's the master switch. We've got a lot of relationships with dentists here in town that do tongue tie and lip tie revisions. So I had a new one start today that was a little baby. And the mom had no clue why she was here, but the dentist told her the little baby needs to be adjusted. So I got to tell the chiropractic story, which I love, and I was explaining to her, that study that says that, 90% of brain functions happens in the brainstem at the time of birth. Right. And so where you're supposed to protect the head of a baby, I totally agree with that, man. But dude, protect that neck, and if you can't get that atlas pressure off of the brainstem, that baby's not going to have the best chance to thrive.
You've made it to Chiro Hustle. Sit back and learn from the greatest influencers in the profession on the world's #1 chiropractic podcast. This episode is sponsored by Imaging Services, Chiro Health USA, Chiro Moguls, Pure Chiro Notes, Titronics, Sherman College of Chiropractic, New Patients in a Box, the Influencer Authority Podcast Training, Mango Voice, Community Healthcare Resources, Life Chiropractic College West, and M-Sculpt. Let's hustle.
Well, I'm sure you've heard this before, but I call it cradle to grave care.
Totally.
I also have heard it said womb to tomb.
Yeah.
Or tomb to womb.
Yeah.
Or whatever you want to say. And I've also heard, well, something I like to tell people is from first breath to last breath.
Yeah.
I think when you think about the care of chiropractic, the implementation for the development, for the life-giving source that it is, it's very evident in children and babies.
Yeah.
It's very evident in dogs and horses and animals.
Yeah.
The only people we've had to ever convince that chiropractic is good for them are adults.
Right.
And people that are coming from a different dogmatic approach of thinking, that were born into a different thought process of what health and healing is.
Totally right.
But when you talk about like the development of life through chiropractic over the course of a lifetime, it's a better quality of life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, cross education is definitely different. Like I said, I graduated in 2006, and you know, the conversation with medical doctors back then was a whole lot different than it is now. And I do respect their openness to understand what we do. I spoke with a local thing as a Zoom call last summer where there was 252 MDs, DOs, and PTs. The event was called Hot Topics, and they wanted me to be the closing speaker for the CEU event, right? And so my opening was this, because you need to find a way to break through to people, right? And my opening conversation started like this. I said, you know, we're going to have a conversation that we need to see eye to eye on before we ever start talking anything about what chiropractic is, what it isn't, what you think it might be. We need to understand that the nerve system's key is communication, right? Any communicating system that has interference is going to function less optimal. And at this point I said, so like this Zoom call, if I cut my mic and I hit the mute button, right? And then I just kept talking and they're freaking out. And the organizer's like, no, we can't hear you. We can't hear you. Right. And it was a silly example, but it's like, man, we created some interference in there. And by removing it, my message now got back to these people. The turnout we had from that, the response, the comments were phenomenal, because we started at a basic premise that said, all I want to do is increase communication in somebody's body. And the nerve system is the gateway for communication from the brain to body and body to brain. And from that, we could start then building, what is interference? How does it happen? How do we remove it? And I think that that's one of the ways to answer your question, that we can do it, is by getting out of our comfort zone and making relationships with MDs, DOs, PTs, dentists, midwives, in order to provide better education for people.
Yeah, I'm just making some notes here, and one of them is philosophical resonance and belief, and the other is marketing.
Yeah.
And I was on a call last night with New York's Band of Brothers, and I was like, do you guys want to know something that I do to communicate to patients, like when I'm out scheduling them in at an event? And I was like, the Sid Williams thing you mentioned about dropping keys. And I would say to these people, like, you know, a belief system is the Easter Bunny, a belief system Santa Claus. And chiropractic is a healing art. You don't have to believe in it. But when you get the subluxation corrected in your spine, C1 specifically, you don't have to believe in chiropractic. It will just work.
It will work every time.
You don't have to tell me you like it or you don't like it.
Yeah.
Like your arbitrary idea of like or not like are not needed. You just got to lay down whatever position the doc tells you to go in and let them adjust the segment and see what happens.
Totally right. Totally right.
The other thing that, you're talking about marketing with like midwives and other people and like local professionals.
Yeah.
I also think that people should go, unsolicited marketing advice. I think that everybody that's a chiropractor should honestly go make relationships with people at urgent cares and start building a relationship with those cases, because those practitioners want least invasive. They want those people to get better without more drugs, and they don't want to do surgical consults because that's more paperwork for them.
Totally right.
So if they could find a good referral source like a chiropractor that they could take the cases that they're getting dealt with and have like a co-managed plan,
I love it.
Those urgent care would probably be really good alliances for people. And the other one is kind of like in the chiropractic circles, an undesirable location, which a lot of people don't like, but they're called the joint. And if you went to every joint around you and you said, hey, I'm a principled chiropractor, I do x-rays, I do full exams, I can take all of your accident cases, all of your hot disc cases, all the cases that need x-ray, I want to be your go-to.
Great idea.
Your clinic will grow fast too. So I think not only getting in connection with, yoga studios and, the midwife groups and like natural health groups, I think that the people that are actually on the other end of the spectrum, that people are like, stay away from me. Those people might be a huge benefit to practice growth and relationships within the chiropractic community too, even though, if you know their limitations, you can fill the gap between that.
Totally agree.
So yeah, I had to jump in and just share a couple fun things I was thinking about with like, people's belief system and chiropractic, and as like communicating to a larger audience. I used to go sit at the Chamber of Commerce when I worked at a clinic in Chicago. And the best talk I ever gave, Ryan, is I went in with an abscess tooth like blowing up, and I showed it I had one slide.
Okay.
I just left the abscess tooth up the whole time, and I talked about subluxation. And I said that's what your spine tissue looks like when it's inflamed.
Yeah.
And you just can't see it.
Awesome.
I go, that's what your spine looks like. There's a lesion on your spine right now when it doesn't feel good and you have headaches. There's a lesion on your spine right now when you have low back pain and you have numbness and tingling going into your arm. There's a lesion on your spine. And if you don't want your tissue and your spine to look like that, you should come get checked.
Totally right. Such a good idea. Yeah.
People just need to have you communicate with them to a point where it makes sense to them.
That's right. And I think that's maybe one of the downfalls is that our education is so great and we've got, this vast array of details and knowledge that we can share with people that it just has to be simple, right? Because the average person, especially if they're coming in for pain, right? Like the average person it's not that they don't care or they don't want to learn, but it's like they don't have the capacity when they're hurting. It's like, dude, you just got to fix me. But you do need that point to follow up. And that's where I think that, the education needs to be kind of a multifaceted approach where it's not just like, this is what we're going to do, so come in and be compliant. It's like, let's continue the education process. Let's show you why you hurt first, right? Because that's what brings you in. And then as you do that, then let's develop this relationship and show you how you can thrive.
And then they become referral sources and they feel good, they look good, they perform good.
Totally right.
Deion Sanders, one of my favorite quotes is, look good, feel good, play good, get paid good.
There you go.
And I think that if everybody just followed that plan, everybody would be sorted out. They'd all be under chiropractic care.
Yeah, I think that's totally true. I totally think that's true.
A couple more questions. I know we're running short on time, but let's future pace. How do you see chiropractic developing in 5 years?
Well, if people just listen to this podcast, they'd know what to do and it'd be banging. So no, I think that the awareness that we've had in the last few years, I think gets people to shift away from maybe the big medical model that's been so dominant for the past century, that, health comes from within and we don't need an outside source to regulate our body, to tell us what to do. And that's governing body. That's that's a pharmaceutical body, that's all kinds of things. So but I do think that there's probably a segmentation that happens with people who maybe were on the fence and now they get pushed one way or the other. And I think that unfortunately that divide that you have in the population, let's say politically or philosophically with medical care, or let's call it healthcare in general, that may get a little bit wider. But I think that the awareness and the waking up side of things is better than ever. So I would say in 5 years we're going to be sitting in a lot more favorable spot than we are right now, for sure.
So a couple fun questions for you moving forward. Appreciate that answer. Let's go lightning round.
Okay.
TikTok videos and YouTube videos, are they hurting the profession or helping the profession?
Oh, I think they help. Especially with what I do. I'm a scientific specific chiropractor. I take x-rays, I analyze and correct vertebral subluxation. So when you have somebody coming in asking, what a ring dinger is, the guy's got a lot of views, right? And he's exposed a lot of people to chiropractic. That gives me a chance to educate why a specific adjustment's good. Gotcha.
Your heroes, who are some of your heroes in chiropractic? And if you could have lunch with anybody for an hour, who would it be?
Man, I never met Dr. Sid. I came to DE maybe a year or two after he passed. And so I would like to meet him. I had a sit-down conversation with Dr. Sigafus about 3 months before he passed away. I was leaving a DE one time and I was gathering my things and I look up, the room's completely empty and he's sitting back by himself on the back wall. And I went back and I talked to him for about 20 or 30 minutes, just one-on-one. I'd like to finish that conversation. That was pretty good for me. Okay. And next one, if you're the last chiropractor on planet Earth, would the profession survive? Absolutely, man. Yeah. Just get training more people, right? Just like what BJ did, DD could have kept it to himself and that was his goal, but BJ wanted to spread it. And that's the big thing. My last family that I had in here today, single mom, 4 kiddos, 8 and down, right? So lots of energy, lots of love. But one of the kids was just cruising around and being goofy. And I stopped and I grabbed her hands and I put them on mom's head while I palpated the neck. Obviously the kid's not doing the adjustment, but the kid's hands were where my hands were at. And as I set that bone, the kid felt it, looked up at me, and I think the inspiration of what we do and what we get to do, what we get to share, that's how we empower the next generation. Well, I think that's a new staple question for me as I move forward with Chirohustle is I want people to find some identity and pride in this profession again. And I want to dust the boots off. I want to dust off the gloves. Yeah, man. I want to empower this profession once again to go on there and to do their best work ever. Let's close out with a miracle story. I love this part of the segment. And if anybody gets to this part of the show, they really get the best part of the show. Yeah. It's because it's healing. It's hearing about the healing art of chiropractic. Yeah. Well, I'll share the story that brought me to DE. Okay. So I have this, I opened this practice up in July of 2012. I had a lady that came from my dad. Now Wichita's not that huge, but there's an east and a west side. And for some reason you just don't go to the other one. It's like 15 minutes. It doesn't matter. Right. But like if you're an east sider, you stay there and whatever. So this lady was an east sider. That my dad's practice that I practiced in with my wife for 5 years was a west side practice. When we opened up the east side practice, she came on over. Now, back in the day, I was a bit of a mixer, right? So lots of standard process protocols. I still love standard process vitamins. This is what my kids take. Like, it's all good. But I had racks and racks of them. I had full therapy. I had a massage therapist in here. And I had, obviously x-ray. So the lady comes into me and she, I said, well, what's going on? She said, well, I've got MS. I've got a lesion at C2, 8 millimeters that every time, and Dad, if you watch this, I love you and there's nothing against you here, but every time your dad would adjust me, it would leave me with just this ringing headache, right? And the headache would last a day or two and then it would go away, but my neck pain my neck stiffness that I deal with would go away and it'd stay gone for about a week or so. And then the stiffness would come back. I'd have to go back to him. And so if you have a different approach, I'd love it, right? Now, the funny thing is she was 4 months pregnant. So x-rays, all modalities are out the window. With her MS drugs that she was on, I couldn't do my supplements, right? I couldn't do my standard, my diversified, or even upper cervical adjustment, but I wasn't really doing too much upper cervical at the time. So I was backed into a corner where I thought, what do I do? At Parker, we learned 9 different techniques. And one of the techniques that I remember learning was SOT. And I remember learning SOT. My memories aren't that fond of it, because I remember thinking, like, this isn't the chiropractic I grew up with. This is all baloney. I'll never use this, right? But when you're backed into a corner and you don't have any of your tools that you normally use, you have to dig in and figure something else out. So I said, you know what? There's this wonderful technique called SOT that I'm trained in, and we're going to do a no force technique. It's called the cervical glide. It's a process where you move the neck in kind of a figure 8 pattern, and you open up the facet joints. And I started that on her, and she came back a couple of days later, and she's like, well, not only is my stiffness gone, I feel clear. I feel great, right? I said, cool, let's keep doing it. So I did that thing. And this goes back to maybe something that you had said, like, I didn't even have to believe in it, right? Because it's not a belief system. It's a healing art. I performed that SOT glide on her from July until about January. In January, she went down to Oklahoma City to go to her MS specialist down there. And she comes back and she says to me, she goes, Dr. Ryan, you're never going to believe it. And I said, what's up? And she goes, they had 5 or 6 MDs looking at it, 2 or 3, neurologists and 2 or 3 radiologists hovering over my MRIs, and they couldn't find my lesion. And she'd had it for like 8 to 10 years. And I was like, oh, really? And she goes, yeah, they told me it was a miracle. Now, she's a pastor at a church about a half mile away from here. Okay. So if anybody's got the miracle card up her sleeve, it's her. Right. And I was like, oh, well, what did you tell him? And she goes, I told him it wasn't a miracle, but it was chiropractic. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. She goes, and I told him that my chiropractor was going to write a case study to tell him how it was done. Okay. Now at this moment, like, my stomach's dropping. Right. And what was really cool is at the time I was running a whole lot, and I'd run at my lunch break, and I was listening to what I feel like was the first chiropractic podcast out there. Oh my goodness, what was it? It was the
Spinal Column Radio.
I talked to you about that at DE. I was listening to Spinal Column Radio.
Thomas Lamar, shout out to Thomas Lamar.
Thomas Lamar, man, this story is dedicated to you, brother. So she's like, I told him you had research. No joke, man. This is just how God works. 2 days before that, I'm listening to Spinal Column Radio. Dean Satilli is on there, and he's talking about a study with Japanese game hens, how they fuse their neck. It's the Journal of Spine 2005, the July issue. They fuse the neck in a reverse curve, and at the point of reversal of the curve, they get neurodegenerative changes that were associated with MS in adults, right? In adult humans. So she's like, do you know any studies that have to do with that? Well, actually, there's the Journal of Spine 2005, right? And I quote this whole study to her, and she's like, yeah, that's it. I knew you'd know how to do it. So I go home that day at lunch, and I'd never spoke to Dean Satilli before. I didn't know what Dynamic Essentials really was. I'd heard it promoted on the Spinal Column Radio. But I shot him a message on Facebook, and I said, hey, man, if no one's ever told you thank you for what you do, I just want to say thank you for doing this one interview, because it's helped me connect with somebody, and it's changed her life, And he responded back in a typical way that Dean would. He said, if you want your life changed, come to Atlanta this weekend for Dynamic Essentials. And I remember pausing for a second, and I randomly threw it to my wife, not really knowing what she was going to say, not even know if I was going to do it. But I go, hey, you mind if I go to Atlanta this weekend for a seminar? She goes, yeah, sure, go for it. So I booked flights. I went to DE, and my life has changed because of that. So as far as your chiropractic success story, that's one for the patients, and that's one for the chiropractors, because the awareness and the skill development and the passion and the certainty, that's all came from being at Dynamic Essentials. And man, we talked about that cogwheel going forward, right? My certainty yields better results, which strengthens my certainty, which patients feel. That's it, man. That's how it is.
Beautiful nightcap for our story. Dr. Ryan Dopps, really appreciate you being episode 464 of the Chiro Hustle podcast. Is there anything I didn't ask you that you'd like to share tonight?
Oh man, I had a lot of fun. I really appreciate having the opportunity to do this. You know, I love and appreciate everybody in the profession and those outside that are doing what they do for the betterment of chiropractic. You know, invest in yourself, right? Invest in yourself. Take the time to become a better person, because the world needs better people right now. And if we can become better, then we can make that shift. And 5 years from now, it'll be the result of the hard work that we do today.
Amen, brother. Well, have a great night down there in Wichita, and appreciate you being with me tonight. And sometimes I close out like this, but I'll do this tonight. You guys are just one story away. Keep hustling. I'll see you guys in the next episode.
Thanks for listening to Chiro Hustle. Don't forget to subscribe and check back next week to continue hustling.